Good morning, students. You're welcome once more to another lecture in the online series of lectures. The school authority have officially announced the commencement of online lectures for all the programs run in the university. On Monday, we had a meeting with the Vice Chancellor where he had officially authorized all lecturers to commence online lectures with the students at all the levels. So we are already on the right track. We have already commenced ours before now. So we'll be building on what we have already started. So all of you should try as much as possible to hook up with all the lectures. Now, this is the last lecture I'm going to deliver via YouTube. A lot of alternatives have been provided. The alternative of the use of WhatsApp group, which all of you already belong to. We'll see that alternative. And then the Zoom app. The Zoom app is the most appropriate for lectures online. The Zoom app will show us in a virtual class where all of you will be seeing me and I will also be seeing all of you. You will participate in the class and I will participate. And as soon as you can as well record the lecture as it is going on. And then as soon as the lecture ends, all of us, the lecture, it will end. But this one is that this YouTube I use, all the lectures are delivered through YouTube. Every other person in the world can access it. In fact, people who are not students, who are not my students, have already commented on the lectures. Some are appreciating it, saying it is a good lecture and all that. So you see, people who are not supposed to benefit from our lectures are already benefiting from it and all that. So with the use of the WhatsApp, online teaching and the Zoom app, all those things will be avoided. So I will be holding a meeting with your course rep possibly tomorrow where they will also understand how the Zoom app is used, and then they will teach all of you, and all of you will now download the Zoom app on your phone so that we'll agree on the time of lecture. As all of us hook on, we'll see ourselves, and then the lecture will carry on from there. So, but for today, we'll continue with the normal YouTube lecture. When I finish the lecture, I'll post it to you. So, I hope all of us are staying safe. I hope we are obeying the rules, the health rules, washing our hands regularly, using hand sanitizers, staying at home, and then praying to God to let this come to pass, so that we can normalize with our friends and relatives. So on that note, you are all welcome to yet another lecture. Today we'll be examining environmental factors and educational planning. Environmental factors and educational planning. I had told us from the onset that educational planning is not one slot idea. It's not just something that just occurs, or you can just sit down in one place and then everything is done. No. Educational planning involves a lot of things are involved in the planning process. So for you to plan education for a country, these variables must be taken into account one after the other. They are important. They are important because education is used for everything in the society. Education is the life of the society. So in planning it, all the variables must be taken into account for us to have a viable education. So, and that is why educational planning is ongoing. It doesn't stop. It doesn't have an end. It's a continuous process. So, because when society changes, the policy changes in accordance, and the planning activities also changes in accordance with that. So that is why all the variables must be taken into consideration. So today we'll be examining environmental factors that affect educational planning. Environmental factors that affect educational planning. You know, so and in our earlier lecture, the educational planning process, I had explained to us the major variables that are involved in the planning process. Now, today we'll be examining the environmental factors that affect educational planning, the relationship between environmental factors and educational planning. When we say environment here, we are not talking about the physical environment, the trees, the plant, the structures. No, that's not the environment. It is the human activities within an environment, within the society, that makes up the environment. You know, and then this environment, for us to understand the environmental factors and educational planning, we must first of all understand the other aspects of the educational planning activity that correlate or affect the environment in the planning process. And what are they? We had examined earlier the goals and objectives that expresses educational intent of a country. So in every society, they have their educational goals and the educational objectives, which is used to express their intention and aspirations concerning education. So every country have educational goals and objectives. These goals and objectives have significant relationship with the environmental factors, which we will examine as we are proceeding. Then the second educational variable that has a relationship with environmental factors are the tasks to be carried out in education. One, we have the goals or objectives to be attained. Now, when there is a goal to be attained, an objective to be attained, then there must be a task to be carried out in order to achieve those goals and objectives. So you see, for us to understand the factors that affect environmental factors that affect educational planning, we must first of all understand the educational goals and objectives to be achieved, then the tasks to be carried out. The tasks to be carried out are decisions we take concerning education, the policies we make concerning education, the educational programs and educational projects that are undertaken by a country. Those are the educational tasks that are carried out. Now, these two factors have significant relationship with the environment. These two factors have significant for it to be carried out successfully. A lot of environmental factors play out for it to be achieved. And what are those environmental factors? The environmental variables, otherwise known as the contextual variables in which educational planning process is executed, include the following: the economic disposition of the country, the socio-cultural milieu of the country, the political climate, and the demographic characteristics. So the environmental factors that affect educational planning vis-a-vis its goals and objectives and the content or the task to be carried out are the economic disposition of the country, the socio-cultural milieu, the political climate, and then the demographic characteristics of the given society. So there is a significant relationship between all these variables. There is an interplay between these variables for educational planning to actually be successful. All these variables must come to play in different ways, you know, and those are what we are going to explain one after the other. Now, how does this environmental variables affect educational planning, and how does educational planning affect these environmental variables. So let's begin with the economic disposition. The economic disposition of a country determines the direction and the magnitude or the volume of educational projects to be carried out. The economic disposition of a country determines to a great extent or influences to a great extent the direction and magnitude of the educational planning process. The extent to which you will plan, the direction of the planning are all determined by the economic disposition. The economic disposition. And now when we say the economic disposition of a country, what are the things that are involved in economic disposition that determines the educational planning? As an educational planner, you don't just jump in and begin to plan. You must take into consideration these variables or factors one after the other, or else the plan will fail. The plan will fail because you need to work on these statistics to get the direction you are going to achieve the appropriate result you want to achieve. So when we say economic disposition, what exactly constitutes the economic disposition that the planner will have to consider in the planning process? They include the level of economic development of a country. The level of economic development of a country. 2, the size of the economy. The size of the economy. 3, the occupational mix. The occupational mix. 4, patterns of resource distribution. Patterns of resource distribution. Then 5, the human capital stock. The human capital stock. So let's take them one by one. The size of the economy. The size of the economy. The educational planner, for the educational planner to be successful, or the planning to be successful, the size of the economy must be taken into consideration. The size of the economy must be taken into consideration. Here, the size of the economy here, you have had when people describe a country based on its economic growth or its economic potentials. So we have developing economies. We have developed economies. Now, the developing economies are known by certain characteristics. They are known by certain characteristics. Those characteristics like low literacy level, high birth rate, high population density, and several other factors that we use to characterize. Level of poverty in this country, in the developing economy, is very, very high. So these are the indicators we use to know the size of an economy. You know, the level of unemployment is high in such countries. The dependence on extractive industries is also high. You know, so all this affect educational planning. It is when a country is buoyant, the economy is strong, that it will be able to finance educational programs. Now let's take it to the basic level, the family level. A man whose income is poor and have 5 children, the income can only take care of one child in school. So in that case, when the man is planning his education, he will plan it in such a way that what he can afford is only what he will be able to spend. If you like kill him, there's nothing he can do. So the economy of a man determines the kind of education the children will receive. Because education is not free. Even when it is free, the child will have to eat food, pay transport, buy books, and all that. So the economic standing of the man in question determines. So the same thing also applies to the nation. The resources, the economic resources, the size of the economy of a country determines the type of education it will give to its people, and therefore, by implication, determines the planning. You plan with what you have. You know, so that is on the size. the size of the economy will determine the human resources to be employed. The size of the economy will determine the method of education system we will adopt. Whether it's going to be free education across all board, or free education for the primary or basic education, or free education for the first two levels. And it is the economy that determines that. Or no free education at all. So countries that are buoyant can go on free education at all levels. Countries that are poor may not be able to afford free education for any group. So in that case, the planning here is affected, because you cannot plan free education when you don't have the resources. So the resources will determine the human resources to be employed in the education system, because you have to pay them, and the economy provides the resources for payment. Then the method and the system of education is also determined by the economic disposition. Which system are we going to run? The system of education we are going to run is strongly linked to the size of the economy. Like I said, whether free or not free, the level that will benefit from the free education and all that, which level will pay. Even the determination of how much school fees children are to pay is determined by the economy of the nation. That is why payment of school fees varies across board. In most countries, the tuition for higher institution is low, cheap. In other countries, the tuition is high. All that is determined by the level of economy, the size of the economy of that country. So that is why in planning education, a consideration of the size of the economy is very, very important, because it is on it that the resources that will be inputted into the education system will be based on. Then the occupational mix. Now, the occupational mix of a country also have a role to play in the educational planning process. What we mean occupational mix here, we're talking about the various the human resource need or the manpower need of the economy in the various sectors. The various sectors of the economy require different levels and types of manpower, which is supplied through the process of education and then through educational planning. So the level of manpower need will determine what education will plan. You will agree with me that from the colonial time till now, the economy has always depended on education for the supply of manpower. When the first higher institutions were built in Nigeria, were established in Nigeria, it was based on the manpower need to be supplied in the various sectors. So the planning must be tied with the manpower need of the country, which is tied to the economy. So these are the economic dispositions that influences educational planning. Then secondly, we have the sociocultural milieu. The sociocultural milieu of a country also help in determining educational planning. The sociocultural milieu here is a reflection of the needs and aspirations of the society with respect to variables such as the culture of the people, the religion of the people, their historical background and development, their values and norms, their occupation, social stratifications. So with all this, so that the educational planner will need to have an understanding of the sociological variables that interplay in a given society, so that education will be planned to capture those variables. So that is why when you plan education in Nigeria based on the sociological variables obtainable in America, it's bound to fail here. It's bound to fail here. So one reason why most of the programs we have planned have not succeeded is because it doesn't capture the social context, the sociological context of Nigeria in the planning process. How can you plan education in Nigeria and you're using American system and you expect it to work as it worked in America? America and Nigeria do not share the same sociological variables, and therefore such planning cannot work. So in the planning process, the sociological variables of a given society must be captured. Those sociological variables, I repeat, are the culture of the people, their religious practices, their historical background and development, their values, their norms, their occupation, and social stratification. All these things must be captured. Now let's take the culture of the people. Culture is an important variable in educational planning. How can you plan education without bringing in the people's culture, their way of life? For example, in a given community that believes in witchcraft, they believe, that's their belief, they believe in witchcraft. Then you come into the class and you begin to teach the such child that there's no witchcraft. Meanwhile, that child believes that what killed the mother, grandmother, relation was witch. And then in the class, you are teaching the child something that has to do with his cultural background. They will not believe you. It won't work. It won't work. One of the factors that is affecting people's belief in this coronavirus is religion. A good number of people are not believing it, and they are tying it up to religion because of the background, the cultural background they are coming from. So they are finding it difficult. So that's the education, that's the culture that is already in them, the knowledge you already have concerning their environment, concerning their people. It's already affecting their belief about the coronavirus. So it will also affect how people will react to what government is telling them. So we must begin the planning of education by capturing the cultural variables of the people into educational programs, or else it may not succeed. Then we have the religion. Religion is a very strong factor in educational planning. The different religious beliefs must be captured into the education system for it to be relevant and make meaning. Because the people that you want to educate are people that already have certain beliefs. They have a belief system which have informed their lifestyle. And therefore, in planning education, all such religious beliefs must be captured into the educational programs. We will really need to understand the religious beliefs of the Northerners, the religious belief of the Easterners, the belief of the Southerners, and in fact, the different ethnic groups, for us to understand how we can live with them, for us to appreciate their beliefs, and they will also appreciate our beliefs. When that is taught through the process of education, then people will live in peace. So if those areas are not emphasized in the educational planning process, it's very dangerous to the society. So that is why in planning education, the culture, the religion must be captured. We must know where the people are coming from, their historical antecedents. We must know where they are coming from. People with a common history appear to blend, and you must teach them that history. That was why the Nigerian education, Nigerian elites, were vehemently opposed to the teaching of European history in the Nigerian education system before now. Of course, as a growing young primary school child, what we were being taught then was the history of European history, to the neglect of African history. We didn't know. Of course, the Europeans had the wrong impression that Africans did not have a history, and that impacted negatively on us. But today, it is discovered that every people have a history, and their history must be taught. They must understand where they are coming from for them to know where they are going. So you cannot plan education without looking at their historical antecedents. That is a major reason we are where we are today. Because even in secondary schools and primary schools, the study of history is becoming obsolete. People are no longer looking that way. But they are very, very important. How can you teach the unity of Nigeria without telling Nigerians where they are coming from? Without telling them the divisive factors that can break them, the historical factors that can break them. As a people knows that in my community, historically we know the communities that share boundary with us, and we know the kind of relationship that exists between we and that community based on historical information available to us. For example, in my community, Omagwa, historically we are told that the Omagwa citizen and Iba citizen Obele you don't kill, you don't do anything harmful. So when you see anybody from that community anywhere, you will know that these communities, we don't kill ourselves. Historically, that is the available this thing. We are also told that when you meet people from so place, be careful because they can kill you. So all this guide our behavior in society. So in the planning of education, every society must know their historical antecedents so that they will be able to move forward peacefully. So that is why it is good that the history of a place must be captured in the educational planning process. Then we have the values and norms. Values and norms. In every society, there are values, there are norms that guide the conduct of members of such society. All such norms must be taught in the school. You cannot, in a Nigerian environment, begin to teach American culture and values. It wouldn't work. And perhaps that is why we are where we are today in terms of behavior, social behavior. A lot of our values have been dropped. A lot of our values are not taught. And these have significant impact on the way of life of the people in society. Look at the behaviors people exhibit today. In my community, it is a taboo for you to raise a knife against your brother. It's a taboo. But because of imbibing of Western culture, people can kill. People are even known to have killed their father, their siblings, and all that. It's a common case everywhere now. Because the education system have not been able to capture and teach these values how it ought to be taught. At most, what values do we teach? The values we teach in the school today are values of examination, how to pass exam, read and pass exam. No, until we are able to put into practice the things we learn, the values we acquire in school, into normal everyday life, before we say that it has made an impact in our life, not to pass exam. So that is why all these values and norms of society must be captured into the educational planning process. The essence is for it to make impact on the life of the citizens and the society. If our education system is value laden, there are plenty of values in it. When people come out to the society after schooling, you will see it displayed. Is it not because the values and norms of society is not inculcated into the citizens as much as it ought to, that people can get into political office and steal public money? They see it as a norm. They see it as a way of life. If these things were taught on time, people will be afraid of that. Why place more emphasis on material things, wealth? So because these things are not properly taught in school, that is why people behave the way they like. So the values of a society is important in the educational planning process. It affects what should be planned for. So in planning, it must be captured. It must be taken into consideration. The people's occupation are also important in educational planning. Now, occupation is determined by the environment you find yourself and the technological development of a given society. These factors determine the occupation. Now, people in the riverine naturally will be fishermen by occupation. People in the upland where we have bushes naturally will become farmers, and several other occupations that will go with that environment. You know, fishing, riverine communities, several other occupations that will go with that environment. You know, so in the educational planning process, these occupational variables, as found within the environment, must be captured in educational planning. You see, because we have failed to capture our environment in the educational planning process in Nigeria, that is why we are where we are. We have not made any serious advances in the area of fisheries. We have not made any serious advances because we have neglected that environment and continue to plan based on other people's environment, America and Britain. Now, we have not been able to make advances in agriculture because we have failed to consider the occupational mix of the people in that area and develop on them. Our environment in Nigeria is an environment that promotes gari processing, for example. What advances have we made educationally in the area of gari production? We still use the archaic method. But countries that have considered their own occupational mix have achieved a lot using education. They have made advances. Today in Nigeria, we have not been able to produce a machine that can produce gari. We still fry. People are still subjected to frying gari. People are still subjected to the old method of tying gari and then leaving it for some days before they can fry and all that. Even the planting of cassava, the varieties of cassava, no improvement has been made on that because we neglected to put them in the educational planning process and begin to teach the child even from the onset at the primary school level. All the toys we use here in Nigeria that our children use at home, we use everywhere, are produced from China. Most of them produced by China secondary school children, even primary school children. At the onset, they are taught to do all those things. Chinese children produce toy phone and all that. They ship them here. There is nothing in relation to agriculture as it pertains to our own environment that we have been able to make advances on using education. Nothing. What we do is to rely on foreign technology, for us to progress. And how can we make progress? So we will really need to sit down, capture the occupational mix of the people into our educational planning process for us to make a headway. This thing is not magic. It's not magic. It's something that we have to sit down and do for ourselves. We have a lot of God-given natural resources that we can improve upon through the process of education. Look at the mangrove. A lot of things there to learn, a lot of things to improve upon, a lot of things to produce from there, and then even export them. If we can only plot them into the educational planning process, a lot of things will be discovered. There is no country that have developed without educational planning. No country. No country. All the facilities we use, all the computer hardware, software that we use today are the direct result of other people's educational planning activities that yielded all that result. And we today use them. Which one have we produced using education in our own country? So the planning process must capture all these things into the planning and then know how we can use them to impact meaningfully on the life of our citizens so that we can be self-reliant. The essence of education is to make the citizens to be self-reliant, to be productive, and an unproductive population will result to poverty, will result to underdevelopment. So if we have the population, why can't we use education and empower them? And all that can only be possible through the process of planning. All right. So sociological knowledge is therefore important in the planning of education, because we need them. We need it to understand each of the sociological input that has to be made in the planning process. All right, so that's on sociocultural milieu and educational planning. So the next one is the political climate. The political climate and educational planning. How does the political climate affect educational planning? And when we say political climate here, what do we mean? A lot of variables combine to make up the political climate of a society. The political climate, the political disposition of an area. Now, over time, a society develops certain beliefs, certain political beliefs, certain political values, certain dispositions, and then that has an impact in their lifestyle, their leadership structure, the way the society is organized, the institutions in that society, all of them put together to make up the political climate of that area. So it also involves how authority and power is shared among the people, allocation of resources, distribution of resources, how is it done in the society. Now all this put together affect or shape the educational planning process. They shape the educational planning process. They shape it in a number of ways. It is politics that determines the direction of education. It is politics that determines the content of education. It is the politics that determines the system of education. So you see, if the educational planner do not have an understanding of the political interplay that take place in a society, what would he be planning for? So you must first of all understand that it is the political structure that determines the type of education. It is the political structure that even determines the beneficiaries of education, the content of what is to be taught, even how it should be taught is determined by them. They determine the human resource input. They will employ those to teach in the system. They will determine the resources they will put in the system. If they fail to do that, then the education system will fail. So that is why educational planning must take into consideration the political climate of the society. So what does the political planner, the educational planner do here? What he does is to do what is called the analysis of the political variables, the interplay of the variables in society that directs education. So because it is the political class that determines the priorities that are to be considered in educational planning. So if the planner does not take all this into consideration, then you're wasting your time. You can even have a very fine blueprint, educational blueprint, if the political class is not keen to implementing them. All that. The level of educational attainment and achievement we have today in the country is determined by the political class. They will determine the percentage of the budget that will be allocated to education. They will determine the distribution of schools. They will determine the distribution of resources to education. So all that must be taken into consideration in the planning process. So It is important that the educational planner understands how each of these political variables affects educational planning and key it into the planning process. Then lastly, we have the demographic factor. Demography is the scientific study of human population. Demography is the scientific study of human population with respect to the structure and the behavior of such population. Demography has to do with the scientific study of human population with respect to the population structure and population behavior. Now, in educational planning, what is important to us, what we use in planning, is the population structure and the population behavior. We'll consider them one after the other and how they affect educational planning, or how they can be used in educational planning. Population behavior and population structure, how they affect educational planning of a given society. Now, when we say population structure of a given country or a given society, we're talking about the age distribution. The age distribution within a given population. Let us assume a population that is 200 million, 250 million, and what have you. Now, in that population, what is the age distribution? How many of the population are youths? How many of the population are adults? How many of them are adolescents? How many of them are women? How many of them are all that? So all that must be understood by the educational planner. So that is why you see the process of educational planning does not fall on one man alone. You will need to get information from those who study demography. We need information from them to know the age distribution in a given area. This is the population of a given area. In that given area, how many of them are of the school age? How many of them are in what category of age? Now, in a population where majority of them are of school age, you know that the number of schools to build, the number of teachers to build, the number of classrooms to build, the number of infrastructures and facilities to purchase and all that. So you see why age distribution is important. Or else you might send a school to an area that is sparsely that's not populated, and then you waste the facility there. It's not surprising then that you visit most areas and see school buildings wasting. Nobody in them. It's also surprising that you visit some areas and you see overcrowded classrooms. All these things, because these factors were not taken into consideration in the planning process. So the other is the sex distribution among the population. What is the sex? Sex here, the gender, the men and the women, the boys and the girls. What is their distribution? We also need that to plan education. The sex distribution in this community. How many women of school age? How many girls of school age are there? How many boys of school age are there? So that we provide for them. Then, apart from this, the structure. Apart from the structure, we also have the population behavior. And the population behavior has to do with the birth rates, the death rates, the migration rates, the size and density, that is the population concentration of the population in a given area. All these are taken into consideration in planning. Take, for example, the birth rate. The birth rate has to establish the number of children that are born within the society. The rate at which children are born. The rate at which children. We are not talking of the number of children here. We are talking about the rate at which they are born. Is it per minute children are born? Per hour? What is the rate? At which young ones are born. When you know the rate at which young ones are born, you'll be able to calculate the population of young ones that are born in a year. When you calculate the number of children that are born in a year, you'll be able to know that the number of children that are born in a year, that in the next 6 years, that population will be in primary one. And then you make provision for them. You know that in the next 6 years, they will be in secondary school. You make provision for them. You know that in the next 6 years again, they will be in the university. You make provision for them. You also make provision for other skills, acquisition centers and all that, to take care of those who cannot proceed to the next level of education, so that they too will acquire something that will bring them. So you see that age, birth rate is important. It gives us an idea of how to plan, because the schools are already built before we were born. We build school to take care of the unborn. So if you don't plan for them when they are not yet born, when they are born, is it when you start planning? So you plan ahead to accommodate children that are yet unborn. So that's why we have to establish the rate at which children are born, so that we can take care of their educational needs in the future. We also consider death rate. Death rate. A lot of factors affect death rate. Could also be heard, like the coronavirus pandemic now is causing a lot of deaths, and all that have impact on educational planning. You know, the rate at which people die will reduce the population, and if that is the case, if you know the death rate, it will enable you be able to plan on how such can be taken care of through education. You know, for example, if you also know the birth rate, if it's on the high side, using education, you can control it through the process of family planning. You bring in family planning into the education system, and then plan it. People will learn so that they will reduce the number of children that they born. You know, so if you know the death rate, you'll be able to also plan for health education, so that people can begin to live long. All that are captured in the educational planning process. Then the rate at which people migrate, move from one place to the other, are also understood and captured in the educational planning process. Why this is important is, if you know the migration rate, how people migrate, whether people are migrating from rural to urban, it means that the facilities in the urban will be congested. So in that case, you know, you plan for urban renewal, so that more people will be captured. You cannot continue to concentrate and stay in one place when people are moving there. It will create congestion. So if even without being told, you can now understand why we are having congestions on our road, why the schools in urban areas are populated and all that, because the movement of the population is towards the urban side. And nothing is being done to improve the urban centers to accommodate those who are coming. You know, urbanization is one of the factors of societal development. So as society, as the population is increasing, the urban areas are also being improved and being extended to accommodate more people. Those facilities that attract people to the urban center, you create areas, and these facilities are provided, and people move into those areas, and then you provide education for them. And then society keeps going. But when this is not taken into consideration, society is bound to suffer. So any society that have failed to plan its education have already failed to remain underdeveloped. So you see, there is a strong synergy, strong relationship between educational planning and the environmental factors, as we have explained them today. So a proper understanding of a given population with respect to educational planning is important, because we plan for the people. Education is plan for the society, and the society is the individuals, the citizens in that country. So if you plan taking into consideration all these factors I have enumerated here, the system will work well and things will move out properly. So these are the economic factors that affect educational planning. Remember, they include the economic disposition of the society, the socio-cultural milieu of the society, the political climate of the society, and then the demographic characteristics of that society. So all these factors are considered have a significant impact or a significant relationship on the goals and objectives of education to be attained, and the type of policy and decisions to be taken concerning education, the programs to be run, the projects, educational projects to be backed upon, and all that. They have impact to make on that. My dear students, on that note, we end today's class. Thank you for listening, and God bless you. Your questions will be taken as usual on your WhatsApp page by tomorrow evening. So go through the lectures, make your jottings, ask your questions, get your questions ready. By tomorrow evening, as usual, you ask them, I will respond to them. But take note that after this class, our next class, all of us would have downloaded the Zoom application on our phone, so that we'll be using Zoom in our next class. Like I told us, it will be quite enjoyable and all that. Well, everything happens for good. The coronavirus has made us to make advances in online teaching and learning. So it's a plus. It's a plus to the education system. Maybe because we refuse to plan. Therefore, it's also a way nature is forcing us now to plan. Most of us, it was surprising that most people did not even know the WhatsApp and how to even use it. But now everybody is being forced to, be compliant to all this. So please try as much as possible. If you don't have an Android phone, try and get one. And belong to the society. If you don't belong, society will leave you behind. Only you will remain there. People will be moving forward. So emergency situation demands emergency action. So the moment we are now requires that we change a style. So all of us must comply to that. Thank you very much for listening. Please remain safe and continue to use your hand sanitizers, wash your hands regularly, social distancing, and then pray constantly that this should come to pass. Thank you, and God bless you.